Hi, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Thomas Beebe, going to be giving this talk about getting started with Informix. This is part 4 of our Internet of Things webcast. This is also, if you're watching this on YouTube later on, does not necessarily need to have watched the previous ones. However, it wraps them up very nicely. If you are interested in dealing with low power, small computing and managing data, or the larger Internet of Things and sensors, I highly recommend you go check out some of our past webcasts on our website. So, going to talk today a little bit about Informix. Actually, we're going to talk a lot about Informix. Specifically, we put this class together because we realize there's a lot of people that they may have seen Internet of Things, they may be involved with it in some way, shape, or form, and they hear all these things about how IBM is putting a lot of time, money, and effort into IoT, sensor data, time series data, and how a lot of it is then filtered back with IBM's focus into Informix. And they may have heard of Informix, they may have seen Informix somewhere, but a lot of people have never installed it. They've never actually gotten up and running. And we want to put together a walkthrough on how to actually go from a blank slate to having an Informix instance up and running. Today we're going to be talking about Linux. We're actually doing it on a VMware running 64-bit Linux, Intel. However, it's the exact same installation for just about any other platform you want. So that's what we're going to get into today. So we're going to get it going with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does Informix run on, a little bit about what you need to have to get Informix running, both in terms of software, hardware, as well as any licensing requirements. I'm not going to get bogged down too much into the licensing or some of the specifics. I am keeping this at a high level because the goal is, at the end of this talk, you can go and get an Informix instance up and running. Something else I'm going to disclaim right now is not everything I say is an absolute. I give a lot of examples of this is how Informix does this, that, or the other thing. Most of the time, if you need something different, there are going to be options on how to do it. But again, for the intention of this talk, it is just getting a basic system up and running. And as you have special needs, Informix is an incredibly flexible system that will meet almost anything you would need out of a database. So we're going to go talk about that, where you actually go and get Informix, and you can go download it today for free. I'm going to go over the pre-install, the actual installation, and then doing a basic configuration where we're going to do just what we need to get running, getting the engine running, and then a few steps afterwards. So the supported platforms Informix runs on. You notice there are quite a few here. It'll run on the ARM box, which is introduced recently, that port. It'll run on just about any Intel chip, Power, RISC, Mac systems, Spark, Itanium it'll run on. The one I did not mention on this, and it just was released recently, was they've introduced the Intel Quark platform. So it'll run on Linux on that as well. So the Informix editions, there are 2 here, and depending on your intent, maybe which one you choose. There's the developer edition, and this is what we're going to use today. It is intended to go out, to try things out, to have for internal development before production. It has most of the functionality included, but there are limits on how much RAM, CPU, and disk you can use on it. It is intended entirely as a development platform. However, it's available for almost every system that Informix comes on, including the ARM chip, and it's not for production use. The second one is the Innovator C edition. For people that are looking at doing an Informix product that they're doing a small scale or starting up or wanting to get involved in Informix, this can be a really good choice. It is limited to a single CPU and 2 gigs of RAM, but you can go a long way with that limitation on Informix. There's no replication involved. However, it is free for use, including for production. So if you have something that you're starting small, you want to get going with it, you want to use it, and it is going to be in production, Innovator C is available. It's available for Windows, Linux on Intel only, and they actually have a Mac port for it. It is not available for ARM, unfortunately, but it is out there and available. There's the paid editions, and these are a full-featured. You'll pay. You also get support. There's the Express, the Workgroup, and Enterprise that get progressively higher in the amount of RAM, cores, et cetera, you have. There's a number of different licensing options out there and ways to do licensing. Contact your Informix reseller if you are interested in getting involved in one of the larger systems. The nice thing is you can upgrade between the systems. So if you start out on a small box and then upgrade, you need to throw more resources, you've taken off, you're becoming the next Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you need more resources, you can do a straight upgrade to one of the higher editions and just keep moving along. So again, and I know the link's a little small here, but try to fit it on a single line. Carlton Doe puts out a tech article he keeps fairly up to date that actually will detail all of the different Informix editions, their limitations, the licensing options, all kinds of other information. So if you're interested, it's on here. I will also mention after this presentation, once we get it up on the website, you will be able to get the PDFs of the slides. So don't feel you have to copy it all down right now. So the next thing that you'll see a lot with Informix is the version number. And it has multiple parts. So when you see them, when you're looking for a download, you're looking to get the copy, or if you already have it installed, you want to see what version you're running, there's a few different parts to decipher. The first part is I actually pulled this from one of the systems I've worked with. The major release is 11. Currently 12 is the current release. Then .70 is the enhancement release. This is the fairly major releases. The major release will be 11 to 12, and then 12 will probably be 13 will be the next one, I would assume. Then the enhancement releases are an internal number. For 11, it started with 11.1, it went to 11.5, then 11.7. It's on 12.1 currently. The architecture is what kind of system is it running? If it's 64-bit, it's usually F. If it's U, it's a Unix 32-bit. T is Windows 32-bit. There's a few other for more obscure hardware, but those are the three most common ones. And then you have the C and then a number after it, 7 in this example, where it'll actually be a sub-release. Each of the sub-releases usually has a number of enhancements and fixed packs. It's usually not the larger overhaul or larger upgrades or new huge amounts of features, but they normally fit some new stuff in there, or it is just fixes and enhancements. And then on some systems, you'll have the fixed pack number as well. Most when you download that won't have a W1. That's only if you get a custom fixed pack from IBM normally. So a couple of Informix terms I want to cover at the beginning of this talk, because I'm guessing and I'm hoping there are people on this call or watching in YouTube later on that there may be MySQL people, they may be Oracle people, they may be Postgres people, and a lot of the databases and database software uses terms a little differently from each other. So wanted to give you the nomenclature for Informix. The first thing is the instance. This is a copy of the Informix engine running. By default, it'll run as Informix. It'll have its own unique ID, and I should have said ID number. So if you're running multiple instances, each will have its own number it's running as. Inside an instance, you have multiple databases. So this is a container of tables, procedures, functions, other elements. It's all living inside of an instance, and you can have multiple databases inside of each instance. And then in the database, you have your traditional tables. If anyone's not familiar with databases, you think an Excel spreadsheet, it is rows and columns holding data. There's obviously quite a few other options in there and pieces I'm not covering, but again, keeping this one focused on the basics. So to give a graphical description, you have the instance container. Inside of your instance, you have a database. Inside your databases, you have tables. The instance itself is owned by the user it's running as. Normally, it's Informix. The database itself is owned by the user that created it, and then the tables are owned by the user that the database is owned by. Again, there is some gray areas here, and there can always be there are lots of options for handling permissions. Also note, inside the instance, it has its own separate memory and disk, so that'll be separate from any other instances you're running. However, all the tables and databases share that memory pool and the disk is available. So on your server, you could have two instances, each with their own databases, and each of those databases with their own tables. And each of those instances also has their own memory and disk pools. So a couple of terms that we're talking about storage. The first one is a DB space. This is, with Informix, what you have is you have a database, a data container, and the DB space will contain one or more chunks that actually store the data. A chunk is an actual device or file on disk that actually stores it. So you could have one chunk, you could have 5 chunks that go to make up a DB space, and you can add more chunks later on, so as it fills up, you just add more chunks to it to give it more room. The other thing to note with this is, which is very different from a number of databases, is in Informix, for the most part, DB spaces and chunks are predefined of space, and they will be pre-allocated. So if you say, I want a 2 gig space, it'll automatically go out and basically take 2 gigs of space on the disk and pre-allocate it. So it doesn't have to allocate at time of writing, which speeds up performance of the database. But it means if you allocate a 10 gig space, you need to have 10 gigs available on the disk to be able to handle it. The other element, just if anyone is not familiar, we'll use the term cooked and raw. Cooked space is an actual file on disk. This is your standard file sitting on your file system. Raw is if you're pointed directly to a disk device and you're bypassing the file system entirely. Most Linux systems, I find, generally do the cooked method. A lot of people on Unix, on AIX, and HPUX tend to go raw disk, but either are available for any operating system you're running. Not actually think about that, just my own correction. I think Windows may not do raw devices. So the next term is the buffer pool. This is the memory allocated. You define it in the configuration. The memory actually allocated to store pages in memory. Am I coming through now?
Yeah, now you are. Hey, folks, sorry for that. We got Tom back on microphone.
No problem. I think my headset failed out there. Where did I leave off? I apologize for that.
Why don't you start at the beginning of this slide, Tom?
Okay. So space terms, going over them, is we have DB space, which is a container that holds a series of chunks. Your chunks are the files or the devices that actually hold your data. So you may have a DB space with a single chunk and they look almost the same. You may have a DB space with multiple chunks so you can extend more space as you need to and have pieces moved around. And then you'd have multiple DB spaces per each instance that are available to the system. So you can really put your space where you need it on disk to make it as efficient as possible. The other bit is, unlike some other databases, Informix pre-allocates its space. So if you say I want a 5 gig chunk, it'll go write a 5 gig file to disk right now. So it pre-allocates it, so you'll never have you won't have the engine when allocating space fill up the disk. So you don't have to worry about running out of the actual disk space. You just have to running out of space in your DB space. But it also means that because you're not having to initialize space on disk, it's always going to be a set block, so it's not having to skip all over the place on the disk so it's more efficient, and you don't have the overhead of actually writing the bare space when you're trying to do database level operations. However, that's different from some other engines, so I felt like mentioning it. The other thing is, for anyone that's not familiar with the term, since we will use them, Informix uses both raw and cooked devices. Cooked device or a cooked file is a actual file on the file system, same as any other file. A raw device is when you point directly to a disk drive or volume, and you bypass the file system entirely. Depending on your system, you may be using one, the other, or both. There's also the buffer pool. This is the pool of memory that is defined on the engine start time that you'll actually store pages. As you read data off of disk, you actually put it into the buffer pool to do operations against it. And the more efficient that is, the more you're actually reading out of memory rather than having to do disk operations. I wanted to cover a couple of glossary terms so there is no misunderstanding when I use one, since they are sometimes a little different between database engines. So again, this is how you can have your DB space in chunks. Each of your DB space can have multiple chunks which are sitting on disk, and each of those chunks is assigned to a particular DB space. And then the tables live inside the DB space or across several. As the note says, table can be fragmented, so you can have a single table living in multiple DB spaces on multiple chunks on multiple disks, so it allows you to spread the load. You can also keep it very simple, one chunk, one DB space for one table. You can make it as complex as you want. There's a great deal of the ability to grow. So a couple of Informix commands we'll talk about, just so there's no confusion on what they mean. On init, this is your actual engine. If you're running it already, if you do a PS, you'll see a whole bunch of on init processes running. That is the central core engine itself. It's sudoed, by default it's sudoed, so you'll actually see it running with enhanced privileges. On mode will actually manage your engine, allow you to change the current running mode. On stats, your general information about your engine, all kinds of statistics, information. We have a great on the website, or if you've been to any of our classes or talked to us at conference, Lester Knutson puts out a great little pamphlet on all of the on-stat commands because there's a lot of them. On-tape is one of the common backup utilities. On-bar is the other one. On-spaces will actually allow you to create, delete chunks and DB spaces, and on-param manages your logical and physical log. So these are all your common utilities that you more than likely will use at some point if you start running Informix. So where do you actually get Informix? Easy way is download from the IBM website. Honestly, I just always Google Informix download, and this will be the first link. You do need to get an IBM login, which is free. The other option is the IIUG, the International Informix User Group. Through the website, if you sign up for a free account there, they have their own version of the developer edition that is available. You can go download off of there as well. So now we've talked a bit about Informix. You know, it is a database engine. It'll run on most anything. It'll scale. It'll run from your tiny little Raspberry Pi system all the way up to your biggest enterprise, Z mainframe or giant Sunbox or whatever you may be running, or anything in between. It's efficient. It's great with the Internet of Things, cloud data, fast data. It is a genuinely great place to start dealing with your data. So now how do we actually get it installed? So the first thing you have to do is you create a group Informix and a user Informix. Again, we're talking Linux here. However, on Windows, the steps are fairly similar. You're going to want to have a user and group Informix installed, but they will actually be installed when you're running the installer itself. The next thing you do is you set up a directory for the Informix engine to go. The installer will do this for you. It is not a bad idea to do it yourself manually. Either way works. It needs to be owned by Informix, Group Informix, and what we recommend internally is doing /op/IBM/Informix and then underscore and then your version. The reason we suggest the Informix and then the version number is if you're running this in a production environment, you will want to upgrade eventually. They'll come out with some new feature, they'll come out with some fix pack, they'll come out with something that enhances the engine in some way you want to upgrade or need to upgrade. And rather than overwriting all the files you have, what we suggest is you install the new version into the subdirectory that you like, opt-Informix, opt-IBM Informix _12.4 FC6, whatever it might be. And that way, if you need to fall back or do other testing, you still have everything there from your old version. The full engine itself only takes a few hundred megs of space, so it's not like on most systems nowadays, it's not going to take up a huge amount of room to keep one or two versions back. And then what we suggest is then you symlink that directory to opt IBM Informix, and that way every upgrade you just update that symlink, and you've got a consistent naming convention directory, etc., while you're still progressing through versions. So the next thing is to actually run the installer. This is a fairly straightforward process. You download the file, copy it to the server or copy it to the system. You extract it into its own directory. I normally just create a subdirectory under the Informix home directory or under root directory called Informix installer, IDS installer, whatever you might want it to be. If it's on Linux or Unix, it'll be a tar.gz most likely. If it's Windows, I believe it comes in a zip file these days. You run IDS, install IDS, and I believe it's set up on Windows, and it'll kick it off. So the actual installation itself, there's two different ways. There's the command line and the GUI way. The Windows version is the GUI way. It is possible to run the Linux install in GUI, but by default it runs in command line, and honestly it's the exact same options, the exact same steps. It's just you're dealing with command line because most of the time when you're installing a database, you're doing it on a remote system anyway. So the installation, you run it as root. The command line is mostly Unix systems. You'll run it this way. Use the numbers to get through the options. We'll be actually demoing that at the end of this. The GUI way, it's Windows on Mac. If you've ever installed any application ever, it's very clean to do. It's just click, 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 click. Choosing your correct options, but the options are exactly the same between the two. Java is required. 7's recommended. The last one is a catch that I've run into. OpenJDK 6 does not work for the installer on most systems I have tried. A number of the ARM Linux distributions ship with OpenJDK 6, not 7 and not the Oracle Java 7 or 8. And so you need to upgrade that before you'll be able to install it. Just the installer just bails out because of missing library. So a couple of options, and we're going to step through this, but the first thing is your default install folder. This is where you extracted the file into your installer directory. Then you go to your default install folder during the installation. You tell it what the default install folder should be. This is where it goes. This is what we recommend, opt IBM Informix version number. The next step will be your typical or your custom install. Most of the time, typical install will work fine for you. It'll install everything. The engine is not huge, and it will bypass that. You can also do a custom install, which will allow you to select the particular sections you want. This is really useful if you're on a small system or a very limited resource system. You can trim out features you don't need or don't want and not have to worry about them. You'll get prompted about role separation. This confuses a number of people. What it does is if you say yes to role separation, it actually splits a number of the administrative tasks into multiple groups on the system. So rather than having a single administrative group that handles everything, you can actually separate the roles out into several different groups, but this has to be done at time of the engine install. generally the people that, again, you may have a perfect case for why you need this. Most sites do not. Most sites will just have a DBSA and which DB system administrator, your Informix user, and the normal user. But if you have a particular need to do separation, it's there. The other option that'll come up is creating a default instance. What this will do if you say yes, it'll create a basic configuration and automatically initialize the system with a very basic instance. I don't recommend you choose this, especially if you're going through following the guide we're going to do here, just because we're going to do those steps ourselves so you get a better idea of what it's doing. If you're on Windows, I find it's actually easier to let it create the default instance, so that way all the files are there, everything is in place on Windows, and you can just get going. So you'll have a number of options. We'll actually go through these, but the big one is obviously you want to have your database server allowed. You have the IBM Informix Client SDK. You can also download this as a separate package, but this is actually all of the libraries needed to compile code against Informix. So if you want to do things like build drivers against it or build code against it, you'll want to install that piece. The Informix Connect, it's a legacy connection utility. Honestly, I haven't seen a system that didn't work fine with Client SDK in a long time. You can get the JDBC driver. The global language support is if you need to do in international languages. And the Open Admin tool, it is not available on all platforms, but this is the web-based GUI management tool. I have a slide on that a little bit later. If you select to choose install OAT, you'll have a couple of extra options. The default host name, this is actually the host name of the server. It'll be put into the web URLs that people go to. The port number is actually OAT behind the scenes runs a copy of Apache. So you actually choose what port that's going to run on. Enable OAT password protection will actually go in and set up Apache password protection on the administrative directory. And the enter name and password, this is supposed to install a default user to manage that directory. It actually doesn't work currently on Linux. I'm hoping this will be fixed in a future release. It's missing the htaccess file it's supposed to have there. So we've chosen our configuration options. The next thing, it's after that is just a confirmation screen and it installs. So the next steps. The first thing you're going to do, and this is, we've got our engine now installed, because that's really all there are. Those are all of the options for the engine during the install. It's now a series of files in a single directory on your system. One of the best things I like about Informix is if you need to back up your configuration, all you have to do is back up that one directory. Everything will be living in there that you need for your configuration and for your engine. So if you need to clone a system, you just tar up that directory and copy it over, or you need to do a backup restore, tar up that directory. As soon as you extract it back, you'll be ready to go once you get your data back on, obviously. So we've now got all of the engine files on the system. What are our next steps? The first thing we have to do is choose a name for our instance. Every instance has its own name. They do not have to be unique, but it makes it a lot easier if they are. For our tests here, we're going to call everything test 1. Obviously, you probably would not want to use that for a production system. The second step is you want to create a profile file. Again, this is Unix for the Informix user. And so some systems it's the Informix home directory .profile, some system it's .bash profile. It depends on what shell you're using. But what's really important here is these 5 lines. It is setting your Informix directory, which is the Informix dir environment variable, your Informix server environment variable, your onconfig variable, your path, and then just make sure you export them, otherwise it won't actually work. The Informix dir is the Informix directory. This is where all the engine files were. This is the same thing that you defined earlier on as the default folder during the install. The second was your Informix server name. This is the test one that you selected earlier. Then your onconfig file. This is the file name that is your master control file. This is the master configuration file for Informix. And then all you have to do is then you take your path, which is you make sure to pass in your current path and add in your Informix bin directory. So all of the Informix binaries will be in your default path for the Informix user. Of course, for this profile, any other user that's going to be using Informix on the system itself, actually on the console, will probably want to either do the same thing or have a global include file to use for this. So you then can source the file yourself. If you're not familiar with the syntax on Unix, it's dot and then a profile, and it'll bring everything into your current session. So again, make sure Informix dir, Informix server, onconfig, and path are set. The second piece we have to do is set up the SQL host file. This is our communications file. This is what tells both the engine what it's binding to, what ports it's binding to, what IPs it's binding to, as well as once we're actually using Informix, it'll let us use this one file to tell it what, if any, remote systems we want to be able to connect to from the local system. So if we want to have replicates or remote queries or anything else, we all go through the SQL host file. So as the Informix user, first step is there'll be a standard file, the std file. So you go to your Informix dir/etc. You copy your sqlhost.std just to sqlhost. Again, there's environment variables if you want to have this name something else. And then you just edit the file. It's a straight text file, no special editor needed. It has 5 fields. They're either tab or space separated. It's fairly forgiving. First field is your service name. So this is your actual, you'll actually define your service name in a minute for the instance. So it's the instance name and the instance alias is. The second thing is your protocol. There's a number of these. Consult your documentation. On Linux, it's use on-sock TCP. So it's your socket connections on TCP. So it's a standard network connection. Or on IPC SHM, which is a shared memory connection. That's what your local connections will be as. If you're running on other operating systems, if you're running some of the other Unixes have some slightly different ones, so consult your documentation. The third one is either your host name or the IP to bind to. So you can give it a specific interface you want to actually connect to by IP. So it'll actually tell it. So you can have multiple listeners on multiple IPs if you want to. And the fourth one is the service name or the port number. The fifth field is for a number of advanced options. I'm not going to go into that. There's lots of documentation out there about it. But the first 4 are the only ones you really need. The standard connect, this is what a SQL host file looks like. So we have our instance name of test1. This is going to be the shared memory connection, so it's local only. So it's on IPC SHM. The server itself is actually called test server, so that's the third one. And then we're actually going to call it the Informix service. I just gave that as a generic one as the fourth one. So this would be something I would have added to the etc services file. I'll show all of this in demo in a few. The second one is our TCP connection. It is our server alias for test1 TCP. And then we have the same settings. And then the third one is, showing an example of what a remote system was. If we have test2 running on another server, we can have it connect out to that. So we now got SQL host. That's all we had to do. This, we actually only need 2 lines to set this up. Our shared memory and our TCP lines. So we only need 2 lines in that file that are not commented out. The second step is our onconfig file. There's a lot of parameters to it. You don't have to set all of them. Most of the defaults are pretty sane. I am not going into all of the configuration settings on it today. We are keeping this at just what you need to get going. A number of the settings can be changed dynamically and the engine after it is up and running. It'll write it to the file and apply it to the current running instance. So that's a consult the documentation for which ones you can do that on. So again, just like with the SQL host, you go to your Informix etc directory, you copy your onconfig, and then you .std, and you copy it to what you set your onconfig parameter to. That does need to match up. If you don't have that set correctly, it will give you an error message. So a couple of onconfig parameters, we will go through all of this, but ones that really need to get set and going in is the root path, which is this is your space. Before you can bring the engine up, you need to have a single DB space, or at least file or volume set up. And you give it a root path, root size, and root offset, so it'll be a path to that file itself on disk. So you need to have that for it to actually bring the instance up in the first place. The root offset, the offset on disk, if using cook space, if using files on disk, it'll be 0 almost all the time. If you're using raw disk, you may need to give it an offset to tell it, I need to start at this part of the disk. The log files, do not touch this. It looks tempting, don't touch it. You'll want to bring it up with your defaults because it will dynamically adjust. You'll want to use the onparams file to onparams application to add more logical logs. Your message path, this is your path to your actual server log. May or may not want to change this. DB space temp, you'll want to change this on a system you're actually using any amount of work on. This is a temp DB space that the engine will write to. Otherwise, it writes out all of your temp data out to your /temp directory on most systems. The big ones you got to set are the DB server name and DB server aliases. This is your instance name, and then the aliases would be any secondary names you want to give this. So for your TCP listeners, if you have other special replication needs, you'd have them in the DB server aliases. For your default system, all you need is your DB server name and then a TCP one for DB server aliases. I generally call it instance name _ TCP. You may have different names. As long as it matches SQL host, that's what matters. The next one I mentioned here, do not change, but it is full disk and NIT. This is a safety valve. If once you have started an instance, if you want to reinitialize, you want to bring it back to a scratch base, everything gone situation, you have to go into the onconfig and manually set this to 1. Otherwise, it'll actually give you an error and prevent you from doing it. This prevents you from accidentally reinitializing a production system. The next couple of configuration parameters, the first one is the SHM vert size, the shared virtual size. This is the amount of memory given to the engine at start time. This will dynamically grow up to the shared SHM total. By default, that's set to 0 unlimited, which is good for most systems if there's not a hard cap. SHM add will actually be the amount each additional block is given. You want to make this large enough so it's not having to constantly grab more, but small enough so you're not having a whole lot of spare memory sitting out there not being used. All of this there are lots of information out there, and I believe we'll have some future discussions and webcasts or articles, as well as our training courses, going into far more detail about how to tune these correctly for your system. Defaults will get you up and running. The next two I'm mentioning here, I'm not going into backups, but your tape dev and ltape dev. This is your device to write out if using the ontape command to do backups. The tape dev is where your backups go. Ltape dev is the file directory or device that is actually going to write new filled logical logs and backups to. In our example here, we're going to set these both to dev null and just put everything out to the null state. It is just the word NUL on Windows if you want to do that. I highly do not recommend this for a production system. For a test system, it's on you, but it works fine for getting up and running. The buffer pool is a specific parameter in the onconfig. This is how much memory are you actually giving to a particular memory pool of where pages read from disk will be stored. By default, it'll create a single one of a default page size, which depends on the operating system. Linux is 2K by default. A lot of the Unixes are 4K. You can have multiple buffer pools. Each one needs its own line. So I apologize for the text being a little small on that, but version 12, but the older version, if you're running 11 or earlier, the syntax will be your size, the number of buffers. So the actual size in memory will be the number of buffers times the size. So in this case, it's a 40 meg. Then there's the LRUs, which are the number of queues to actually handle writing buffers out. The actual queues for writing the dirty buffers out and reading new ones in. There's a lot of tuning that goes into here for what works on your system. I'm going to go with mostly defaults. For example, I mentioned this because these are areas to look at. Version 12 did introduce some new syntax. So if you want to keep it simple, you can actually just give it the page size and how much memory total you want to give it. So you don't have to worry about the number of buffers. You just have to worry about what the end goal is for memory used. So we've got at this point, we're done with Onconfig. It wasn't that many steps. The reality is we're going to change about 5 settings when going through this on the demo, and we'll be ready to go. So we've now got Onconfig written. We've got our SQL host ready. The next thing is preparing the space to actually store the data. The first thing is create a directory. I use Informix chunks by default, /Informix chunks by default. Other people have different syntax or different naming conventions they use for it. But you want to, we find best practice, it is best to have each instance having its own directory that will have all of your DB space and all of the chunk files in one place. It's much easier to keep track of it. The directory must be owned in Informix. It must be 770, and if you're we're actually going to create basically an empty file using the touch command, and then we're going to make sure they're owned by Informix in 660. To show you create the root DB space, so this is the first step. We're going to make the Informix chunks directory. We're going to give it ownership of Informix, set it 770. We're then going to use the touch command, which if you're not familiar, will create a 0-byte file of that name in that directory. So we've now got the root DBS file. We're going to make sure that's owned by Informix and give it the chmod 660 for it. Again, this path here must match the root path in your Onconfig file. Otherwise, you will get errors and it will not come up when you try to bring it online. So now we're actually going to get going. It is as simple as running as Informix, the oninit-iv, which I is initialized, V is verbose. You can use Y if you want to, bypass any yes prompts automatically. And when it's done, it'll actually say verbose output complete mode equals 5, which means it's online multi-user and ready to go. So if you run onstat and then just give it a dash, it'll give you your current version and your current status. So you want to look specifically for the online word, and that means, it's up and running, and then the amount of memory it's currently using. So we've now got our engine online. The next thing we're going to do is create some chunks to actually do some space to actually create something. So the first thing we're going to do is create files for our new chunks. We're calling them temp.dbs, log.dbs, and data.dbs. So the temp.dbs will be for our temp space, log.dbs will be for extra logical logs, and the data.dbs will be for our actual data. So just like with the root DB space, go into the Informix chunks, we touch the files, chmod 660, those files, and make sure they're owned by Informix. And then we use the onspaces command. This will actually let us set up the DB spaces against those files. So again, you want to use a -C to tell it it's going to create, and then -D and your DB space name, -S and the size, that is in bytes. -O is the offset. Again, you really want it 0 unless you're doing raw devices, and -p is the path to the file. So in this case, we have on spaces -c, so create -d log dbs, so it's creating the log dbs db space, giving it the offset of 0, the size, we're going to give it 200 meg there. Yeah, 200 meg. I'm sorry. Path is the path to the file, and it'll go ahead and create. Do note if you give this a large size, and that is the size is in K. If you do give it a large size, it will take a while because it's actually writing out that much space to disk. The second one, note, there is on the temp DBS, there's a -t flag. That is telling it we actually want to create this as a temp space. You can use a non-temp space as temp space. I know it sounds a little confusing, but the temp flag will change how it's processed. It'll make it a little more efficient because less of it's tried to handled in backups. So the next couple of steps. So we've now got our spaces set up. So we've got the engine up and running, the spacer set up. Our next steps. First thing we're going to do is populate sample database. We're going to talk a little bit about granting access, running a couple of queries, and just making sure it works. So the first thing to make sure is going over is, can we stop it and start it? As soon as I install a new server, this is one of the first things I do. So use the onmode command for KUY, and that'll tell it to actually stop cleanly the current instance. Again, the -y tells it yes automatically, yes to all prompts. And we start it back up with the on-init. If you use the -b flag, you'll get all the verbose output. If you just give it on-init, it'll just wait until it comes up and then return the command, the cursor. The command prompt, I mean. So we've now restarted the instance, carried the sample database. It comes and it's in the Informix dir/bin directory. There's a command called dbaccessdemo. It'll go in, it takes a moment to run. It creates a stores demo database. This is a sample database. It can be useful to test scripts. If you're building drivers, it can be useful to actually test the driver connections. So it's up there. The one thing to note with it is in the script, it'll prompt you after a while for saying, do you want to install sample scripts? Say no to it unless you really want to go through, have a whole bunch of C scripts and C files copied to the current directory that you're running this from. So to actually connect to the database, let's check the instance in the database and let's check it out. So there's the dbaccess command. This is a curses-based command line tool for managing the data as well as running commands, and there's a few other features in it. I'm going to show a demo on this. I just have these slides in here for getting around it, but you can actually go in and connect to your stores demo database, make sure it works. You can actually go in and query it, run SQL against it, and do it all through dbaccess. To actually change user access inside of a database, you go give it grant connect to the username, grant DBA to username, or you can. There's all kinds of permission levels you can give it. You can get into extremely detailed levels of permissions out there, but I just want to put out some sample ones because most of the time you'll install an application or you'll create an application and you'll want to give it, that application to have its own user account. So you give it grant connect and then grant, select to this table or insert to this table, or just give it grant DBA if you want to give it all permissions. The big thing to note here is, unlike other databases, some do and some don't, but Informix by default uses the underlying operating system's authentication. So when I say grant connect to Tom, I'm granting connect to myself, my personal account. If an account doesn't exist, it will still take that permission, but as long as the account doesn't exist on the operating system, it's not going to be usable. OAT, by the way, if you are running it, has a really nice user and permission management tool. If you're getting fairly complex, it can be helpful to sort things out. So actually connecting an application. If I'm connecting, I want to connect an outside application, an ODBC connection, something else. The things I need to know. The first one is the Informix server name. Some places it calls it Informix server, some places we call it server name. This is our test1 underscore TCP. This will be our TCP listener because we're going to be effectively connecting from a remote site, so it needs to be over TCP. The second will be a service or port number. 9088 is our default. That's what we'll be using in the demo. Again, it's whatever you set it to. The host name will be your server name or the IP address of the server Informix lives on. If you're running a server with multiple IP addresses, make sure you define on the application the IP that Informix is listening on. Then your user account, and obviously you'll prompt a password and choose your database and your other settings. But these are sometimes a little different from some other engines, so I wanted to mention it. So additional logical logs are something that can be helpful. These are the pieces that actually handle all of the tracking, all of the changes and everything that happens on the system. It's very easy if you're doing high volume to run out. I just want to make a note. Use the onparams command with -a to tell it to add a log, -d to tell it what DB space to put it in, and -s to tell it the size. So you may want to add more logical logs to your system. So at this point, you have a fully functional system. Your Informix is up and running. You can go in there and do stuff. You have a little bit of sample data to play with. You can start loading your data. You can do whatever you want to with it. There's obviously a huge amount that you can do to tune, to tweak, to adjust, but it's going to be a fully functional system at this point. So what do you do now? What are the next couple of steps that I'm not going to go into these, but just things to think about. The first step I recommend, especially if you're setting up a test system or even a potential production system, the moment you have Informix up and running, take a backup of the system. Take a clean backup, especially the Informix directory, but the entire system is not a bad idea. So you have a completely clean copy you can always go back and reference. Second thing is always set up your backups for your instance. A lot of different ways to do this. It's really outside of the scope of the talk right now, but you'll want to obviously make sure you back up your system and back up your data and your logical logs. Then you want to set up your startup and shutdown scripts. Then load your data. Get your real data on there. Take it out of whatever else you're running it in or writing your application in. Bring it into Informix. Play with it. Get to see how it works. Then you want to tune the engine parameters. There is a lot of tuning that can be done. It is very, very unique depending on your system for what is going to give you the most bang for your buck, what area, because it depends not just on the size of your system, the hardware you're running, what kind of data you have, what kind of data loads you, what kind of projects you're running, what kind of jobs you run, when you run them, how your data is stored on disk, all kinds of things you can tune. There's virtually or almost always another area you can get into if you need it to go faster. It'll be pretty fast out of the box. So don't spend your entire life tuning if your performance is great. But if it's not so great, there's a lot of things you can do about it. And then most sites will want to set up replication. It's always a good idea. Hardware is a lot cheaper than it used to be. One of the great features of Informix when you're dealing with the higher level, the paid editions, is you actually get a free you can get a free warm standby system, or not system, but license for the engine. So you can run replication to have a warm standby without having to incur extra licensing costs from IBM. So a couple other notes. The first one is the Open Admin tool. We have some prior webcasts on this. It is a fantastic tool out there. It's free. You can either run the one that's bundled with the engine or get it separately, but it's a great management tool for handling it if you're new to Informix. Or even if you're not, there's a lot of things in here that even for folks that have been running them for 20 years makes seeing a little bit easier. Docker now has, IBM has put out a Docker image for Informix. It goes against the Innovator C edition. If you're interested, the information's out there. So this is a slipstream version that once you have the engine up, it'll get a whole stack of software up and running with Innovator C that works really well together. There's a few links, just referencing. Most of them you probably have seen before is, Informix documentation, the Docker information. Also, we do training, and I'll get to questions in a few minutes. At Advanced Data Tools, we do Informix training, so if you're looking at getting involved with Informix, you want to tune up your DBA skills, or you've been running it for a while, we offer a number of classes. The last one we have currently in 2015 is going to be Informix for Database Administrators. This is a Getting Going class. This would be right after this webcast. What are the next steps? This is a lot of what this topic will cover. Lester Knudsen and we'll put out more information on this upcoming, but we do offer classes also for advanced and a number of other classes out there. It's all on our website, but we do offer a number of training options. Our next webcast, by the way, is going to be September 22nd. It's going to be talking about moving from 4GL to Genero. It's going to be a really cool talk for a lot of places that have old 4GL code sitting around, how to bring this into the new Genero system fairly easily. It's going to be a technical talk. It'll be a lot of fun actually showing the conversion. So I'm actually going to hop over here now into the fun part, which is live demo during a webcast. So of course everything will work as expected. So what I've got here is a simple Linux system. It's actually running under VMware. This is running OpenSUSE 13.1, but Informix will run against just about any Linux distribution out there. They've got an official list, but it covers almost all of the major players, and you can probably, if you're running something obscure, probably get it to work as well. And so what I have right now is I have created the Informix user and group. So I have an Informix user. It's in the Informix group. I've also got my Tom user. I'm currently in as root. I need to install it. The system is completely bare. The only thing I installed it this morning. The only thing I used it for is to do one real fast test install, which then I completely removed. Again, Informix installs everything into a single directory. It makes it very, very easy to clean up. You don't have to go hunting for files or hunting for anything else. You have that one directory to back up, remove, whatever you need to. It makes it very, very easy. So what I have is the home Informix directory, and I've got my Informix file in there. This is the Developer Edition FC5 12.1 or 12.1 FC5. So I'm just going to copy that tar file there. So I'm going to create a install directory to work out of. The reason I do that is because it actually extracts all of the files by default into the current directory. So that way I just keep things a little bit cleaner. If I was using this as a production system, I might actually label the the install directory for version number. So this is doing the nothing up my sleeve. We're not jumping ahead anywhere. The only thing I have on the system right now is just the base Linux installation. So again, it installs everything, and all we have to do is run the IDS install script. OpenSUSE, by the way, does have the newer version of Java, so I didn't have to upgrade that to get this to work. So what it's actually going to do, and I'm going to talk a little bit while this is running, is it goes through, it loads up a Java application. And when I say it's the same as the GUI install, it's really the same. They actually use the same base Java code. It just one displays it on command line, one displays it in the GUI. So it's actually go you through. One thing to note here is they actually have a release notes. They'll link it to you in the beginning. You can actually also get it on they have it on the website as well. But they do put it on the server. This will actually give you, if you're running non-terribly common hardware, or especially if you're on a larger Unix box, you'll want to read it because there may be specific settings you'll want to change in terms of adjusting memory limits, or there may be some kernel parameters to do. If you're running this on a small Linux box, it'll work basically out of the box, but it's worth looking at the release notes later, especially if it's a production system. I'm sorry, it's worth looking at the release notes before you install if it's a production system. If you're running test or dev, you may be able to get away without having to change anything, but it's still worth looking at. It's quick. So the first thing is going through our standard license agreement. I'm not sending this to North Korea. I'm not, redistributing this without IBM's approval. The usual. I'm sure, as you all know, we've read all of this in depth over time. So I'm just going through it. You can, of course, hit 1 just to accept the agreement. So no one complains I didn't, technically scroll through it. I did. But you can hit 1 to agree it. I have read this in the past. And then the first thing we're going to do is the default install folder. So this is where we want to install it. Some versions will give a suggested, other ones will go with, just give you a bare, you tell it where to put it. So tell it to go into opt, IBM, and then Informix 12.1 FC5. So again, you could name this however you want to. This is just how I find it's easy to manage it in the long term, and we've been doing this for many years and dealing with many clients going through a lot of versions. This tends to make life easy. Quite a few people just do it in straight opt IBM Informix, opt/Informix rather than opt IBM Informix, whichever works best for you. So again, it'll confirm, because I'm running as root, because again, I'm running as root right now at doing the installer, it'll create the subdirectories and any directories I need to for it and give them the correct permissions. So we have 3 options here actually. On Linux, it adds a 3rd one on some of the new versions. So we have our typical installation, our custom installation, or extract the product files. You can extract the product files if you want to build your own RPM. You need to do some kind of distribution method. Most people will never touch that unless there's a real problem. The typical installation will install basically everything, which is fine for most people. I'm going to do the custom install here just to show you what it looks like. So I hit 2, it'll take me to the next one, and then it will go through and actually assemble the features it wants to show me, and it just lets me know kind of how the piece works. You'll look at the formatting and see where it is really the same as it would be on a GUI. So it takes a moment here. This always throws me because there will be a little bit of a lag, but there's actually the 51 features. The first one, number 1 here, the Informix dynamic server and database server and everything under it, you really want all of that. It's small enough. There's nothing that you're going to really gain by cutting that out unless you're on a really limited box. The second part here, the client SDK, again, I highly recommend you have this here. It's not that large. Unless you're really limited, you'll probably at some point need to build something against it to build a custom driver, at least on a development box. On a production box, you might not want it. Your JDBC driver, our global language support. Notice the Informix Connect is not checked. Leave it that way because you won't be needing it. It can conflict with the client SDK, so it's one or the other. And then finally, because on Linux, there's the Informix Open Admin tool. The Windows version, for example, doesn't have a 64-bit port of this yet. And then it's plugins. We're going to install it here. Whether you do or not is kind of on yours. If it's development, it's probably or testing, you'll probably want it. If it's production, they may have rules and regulations saying you can't have another web server running, but you can run it on a remote site. So I'm going to go for default. So all I have to do is hit enter. If I wanted to change something, I just type in the number and it unselect it. So it just, am I sure I want it? Yes, I am sure I want the things I selected. So the first thing it's going to do is now it's going to hop over to the OAT options now. It doesn't actually say it's for OAT, but that's what these are for. First thing is the host name. So again, if you don't install OAT, you won't see these. The host name, so this is what the web pages will show up as. Our port number, so there's what Apache would run as. All of this can be configured after the fact, by the way. You're not locked into this. OAT password protection. Sure, we'll say the user's default admin, and then password, which unfortunately that doesn't work. If you look at the Apache configuration, it'll show you the file you need to create. Again, check my OAT talk for more in depth. Again, there's another international license agreement. Just verify that yes, you are consenting to everything, it's the usual license agreement, and yes, I'm going to accept it. So notice the role separation by default is disabled. Again, unless you really need it, I would recommend you keep it that way. It just makes life easier. And then, do you want to create a server instance by default? No, I don't want to in this case. Generally, I don't recommend it. It's easy enough to get one up and running that gives you the control you want. And then it's going to go through, and what it's actually doing is it prompts me first to remind me. It is not and again, it's showing you how much space it's actually using here, which is 790 megs, and this is with the kitchen sink. You can easily tune it down to about 300-400 meg. I've seen it as low as, I think, 40 megs in space if you get really, really space tight. But nowadays, 700 megs is not huge, and certainly if you cut out some of the languages and some of the sample files, it cuts it way down. So it's telling it where it's installing. This, by the way, if you're installing a production system, I do recommend taking a screen capture at this point or just saving this off. It's useful to have around. So what it's actually going to do now is your usual install. It goes through, creates the directories, extracts all the files where they need to go, and then they have a series of scripts they run to change all of the permissions on all of the files it needs to, set all the, they have a couple of scripts that have the set UID bit set, goes in, gets those all set up correctly. So it'll create everything it needs to, and everything is in that one directory. So this will not take very long. Again, it depends on your disk speed, but this is not a terribly long process to install this. On some of the really small ARM systems I've worked with, it takes, I'll go to do it, walk away, and come back 5 minutes later, and it's done. Some of the big systems, this will take 30, 45 seconds. This is running on a laptop right now, so this may just take just a minute more. But the nice thing is, if you seeing the installer the way it is, if you go in and, for some reason you're running a legacy version, you go install version 9, you install version 10, you install version 11, you install version 12, it's pretty much the same thing. There's a few new features, a few new options in, but largely it's a pretty straightforward process to install. The Onconfig file has been the same since version 7. They add new features to it, but the basic concept is the same. SQL host has been there forever. DB access has been there forever. The engine itself has gotten much, much, much faster and much smarter with all kinds of new features and some of the absolute bleeding cutting edge stuff. The core of the system still has the same features that it did way back when. They've just made them better. But most everything you may have used, if let's say you're on version 7 back at the office, that's all you're used to, you come install version 12, you're going to be able to get around quite easily. There's a ton of new features and new tools for you to get in and get even more productive and faster and everything else, but the old tools are still there. They still work and largely are the same as they were before. So now we're done with the install. Gives you the nice status update here where it shows you, everything was successful. So then go in and exit the installer. So this has taken, and me talking through and stopping in a few parts, I think has taken me about 14 minutes, 12 minutes to actually get the engine installed. Again, if I was doing this on a production system, there's a number of other steps for tuning and prepping and everything else that do fall into play. But for a small test system, just getting up and running, it is a very, very efficient engine. So everything you need is in this one directory, and all of the subdirectories. I'm not going to go into what everything is, but everything is under here. So there's not other things spread around your system. There's not other pieces around. So the next thing I'm going to do is go in and set up my Informix user profile. So this will be sourced. I think I said this one is. This one's Bash profile. This will be sourced in when the user Informix logs in. Helps if I'm actually looking at the right one. I've actually set this one up already. The one thing I need to change is the Informix dir, but you see how I've set in the Informix environment, the Informix dir, the Informix server, my Onconfig, my path, and then I export them all. So what it will do is when I change to Informix here in a moment, I will have all my environment variables ready to go.
Tom, you need to change the Informix dir to include the release.
Thank you. Well, what I need to actually do is change this. So the second thing I do,
I
got it. And you're cracking up pretty badly. So the second thing I do is create my symlink. So I'm taking that Informix path with the full version number and pointing it to opt IBM Informix. So now I'm going to work everything out of opt IBM Informix. So it doesn't matter that I'm on FC5 right now. If I upgrade to FC6, I'll update the symlink, and all of my scripts, anything pointed to my opt IBM Informix are already set. I don't have to update paths. I don't have to update profiles. Everything is already ready to go. So I'm going to change up to, I've already created the Informix chunks directory, so it's owned by Informix. And what I'm going to do is change to my Informix user now. And so I've already got my Informix dir set, my Informix server set, so my profile's ready to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to my Informix dir /etc. And the first thing I'm going to do here, because I want to use service name, is go to, if you have not seen this before, the file is on Unix SC services. This is one of those files that's been there forever. And I want to look for the default service name for Informix, by the way, is SQLEXEC. It is port 9088. You'll actually see it listed under Informix, under some version of Linux. Some just say it's IBM's SQL interface. But you'll notice the name Jonathan Leffler next to it. He is one of the longtime developers of Informix. Great guy. If you ever work with the Perl module, he's the one that has written that. He's put out a ton of tools for it, but he's the one that actually got this into the official services of Unix. So by default, Informix runs a 9088. You'll find it sometimes on other ports, but that is the standard one. So we're going to use the SQLEXEC. And the next thing we got to do is copy the standard SQL host file so we can use it. It gives you, there's a big header on most of these files giving you what all the different flags are, so it's really helpful to have around. First thing you can go through, read it as much as you want. The first thing is you'll notice there's a demo on. That's just a demo version there. We're not using it. You can either leave it or delete it. That's on you. So I'm going to do tab separation here. So first column is the instance name. Second one is I'm telling it shared memory. Third one is the host name. I believe it was demo host. I'll come back and check that if it's wrong. And the fourth one, for this shared memory, because it's not listening on a port, this can be anything as long as there's something there. Most people just put the standard port number or port name there. It doesn't matter. It could also just be X. And the second one is going to be our alias. So again, this will be our TCP listener. And again, this one does matter for the service name. So this will take SQL exec, look in the services file and see that it's 9088 and use that. So that's the port it'll be listening on. Demo system, not demo host, my mistake. So now I'll have SQL host ready to go. The next step is our Onconfig. And again, we're going to keep this very, very short. There's a ton of flags here, and I don't want to get bogged down in them. And again, to make sure that I don't mess up the naming, I make sure it's matched to our Onconfig environment variable. So it's onconfig.test1. Again, it'll tell you in here what everyone does, so you don't have to worry about it. So root name, we're going to call it root DBS. Our root path, so that's the next important one is just making sure we have our path set up. I'm not sure if the bell is coming through on the webcast. If not, I'm going to, or if it is, I'm changing this real fast to turn that off. So I'm not going to go through the rest, most of the rest of the settings. We're going to keep it really to the bare minimum. Logical log information, there's long transaction, message path. Again, there's a huge number of settings here. You can go through and do all kinds of tunings, custom setup. But the next part we need is the server part. The server num, this is the number, this is the unique identifier for the instance. So for each instance on a physical system, it needs its own server number. The server name is the name of the system. Then our server aliases, so this is our TCP listener. And again, our full disk init, this is if you take it, and a lot of people, I mention this because you may be doing this with a test system or a demo system. If you want to blow it away and start over from scratch, you need to make sure to set this to 1. Otherwise, it'll bail out during the initialization. So again, most of the settings here will get you up and running and get you to a decent place with no changes. There are lots of things you can change, lots of things you can tune. Again, your shared virtual memory size, you probably want to increase that. Again, I'm not going to get into recommendations right now. That's a whole nother talk. The other one I'm going to change here is changing our LTape dev. By default, it's called dev tape dev, which generally doesn't exist. You know, when this was originally created and why everything's called on tape, most everyone was backing up to physical tape drives. Now, most people back up to file system or remote sites or what have you. In our case, for simplicity, we're just going to take these and dump them all into dev null. Obviously, on a production system, please don't do that. But for getting up and running, playing with Informix, it's there. There's a lot of other options after this. I'm going to skip down to the buffer pool just to show that real quick. I'm going to leave these standard, but these are one area you definitely want to change if you want performance improvements. So by default, you'll have 2 lines, your default, which any new buffer pools will automatically be given this, and then your default page size on Linux, it's 2K. So by default, we're going to have 50,000 2K buffers, which is really small. You'll probably want to increase that for any test system. For my purposes, I'm just going to leave it stock. So we now have our SQL host file set up. We have our onconfig file set up. Next, we need to touch our Informix chunks root DBS file, chmodit 660, and change ownership. So we've got that all set now, and we're going to do an on-init IV. So we should have everything set. There's the moment of truth of a live demo. And it does, I intentionally, some people do IVY. I always like just the sanity check of just getting in the habit of IV just to be safe. So it'll go through, and I think I know why it gave me an error here, and it tells you there, the failed memory. Yep, it was because I had tried did a test install just to make sure the Java was correct earlier, and I had initialized the disk. I have to set that flag, the full disk init flag, because it sees that there's already space in the root DBS. So I have to tell it, yes, it's okay to overwrite that. And what it will actually do is once I do this, it'll reset that flag to 0 to make sure that you can't accidentally overwrite again in the future. So to goes through all of the different steps. If it does bail out at any point, the Onconfig log or the online log will generally be pretty helpful in telling you as to what went wrong. You know, if you don't have your DB server alias name matching, you know, you forget the underscore or something like that, it'll be pretty good at telling you. Just go in and read. The quick tip on that is the onstat-m will show you the tail of the online log. So this will tell you what's going on. If it fails, it'll show you. But note when I do the onset dash, we now have it up and running. We now have a running version of Informix. Going over on time a little bit here, so I'm going to just wrap this up pretty quickly. I'm going to show a quick DB space addition. So I'm doing is just adding data DBS. Again, everything has to be, you know, owned by Informix. It'll tell you if it's not. Potentially keeping this small because it's, by the way, the parameters do not need to be in any particular order. It just helps to keep it consistent. It's pretty good also telling you when you've just made a typo. So it does is it goes through, it pre-allocates it. As I said, it actually, you notice the file size, it actually does automatically initialize it. It's actually larger than I left here, again, because I tested this a few minutes ago and forgot to delete these files. So it pre-allocated a gig the last time I did this. I redid it here for 100K. That's why the file size is different. But if I do an onstat-d, which shows us our DB spaces, you see we now have 2 DB spaces, root DBS, data DBS. Each one has their own chunk. Shows us the size. Note here the size is in pages, not in K. It's the note down here. So we're now up and running. Quick showing of DB access. Actually, I only showed DB access demo first. So this will create the database. It does not prompt you, by the way. It just goes in and creates it. Just be warned. But it goes in. It's just your very sample, very, very stock sample, you know, transactional database. So it's small. It doesn't take up much in the way of resources, and it's just going to sit there idle the rest of the time. And this is where you say no, otherwise it dumps a bunch of demonstration scripts there. So now I'm going to run DB access, and it'll prompt me when I go in to choose a database. So we have stores demo. The other ones are the internal databases to the system. And it brings me in the SQL, and I can do a select star from items. You know, this could be whatever SQL I want. If you've ever used the curses, this command has been around for a long time, but it still works really, really well. It can be used from the command line as well. And we have our data. So we've got a database up and running. We've got databases. We've got the whole system, and we're ready to go to start receiving sensor data. We want to use it to, you know, run a store. We want to use whatever. We now have a database up and running. We are good to go with Informix. And I think, including me talking for a while here, this took all of a half hour to actually go through. And reality is, you know, I've timed myself that, you know, going from bare scratch to up and running, I've done in 15. Again, that's 15 for starting up. Tuning is a whole nother matter, because then that's where it takes some time, and getting an engine set up specifically a particular customer, very different matter. But getting up and running with Informix is very, very easy and very quick. And to start playing with it, if you're interested in the IoT, you're interested in any of the new features, or even any of the old features, you're taking over a role running DBA for Informix. It is all there for you. It doesn't take that hard to get up and running, and you can do it for absolutely nothing in terms of charge to get up and running with Innovator C or the Developer Edition. I am going to, because I'm just going to hop right into questions at this point. So if you have questions, you can ask now. There is a chat piece on here, so you can. Okay, a couple of people sending in questions, so you can feel free to drop me a note here if you have a particular question. So feel free to send me a question if you have one. If you feel shy or think about one later, feel free to drop me an email. My email's on here. It's all over the place on the website. So feel free to drop me a note on that. So any questions? Okay, I got a question of how can I optimize the query and tune the database? And that's really, I'm going to go outside that's really outside of the scope of this talk. However, we have some old web articles and webcasts about it. We'll have some more. It really just depends on your system, your query, your database, etc. But if you drop me notes, if you have particular questions, I'm happy to answer them. So got a question about our courses. So we have several different courses. We run them throughout the year. We just finished up our advanced tuning course. And what they are between 3 and 5 days. We normally do them split both in person here in our office in Northern Virginia, as well as online students. We set up remote access for them. We generally have a pretty healthy mix between the two, and then it goes over our basic course is kind of the going through. This is all the tuning stuff. This is including the install, but also then going into, doing backups, doing management, doing your administration. How do I come in? I haven't used Informix, or I'm not that advanced, or I'm just a application developer, or I'm just rusty on it, and I need to do a DBA job. Our basic course, which is the one coming up in October, covers those. Our advanced course goes into the real deep tuning stuff. How do I take this query and fix it? How do I take the engine and make it, scream? It's what all of those different Onconfig parameters, what do they actually do, and how do I make them work the best for my company? That's a real fun one, because we go in, we take a bunch of baselines, and then spend the course with everyone working together and competing against each other a little bit to see who can get the best times on it, who can really, going in hands-on for dealing with all the different parameters, all the different facets of the engine. The engine is fast out of the box, so if anyone hasn't worked with it before, I don't want you to think it's slow, but there are lots of ways to make it even faster and, make things very, very tight for your system. We also do replication classes, and we will do custom classes and even on-site classes if there's enough interest. So any other questions? Question about the exam preparation. We do not teach directly to the IBM certification exams. However, what we cover in our courses have a huge amount of what is covered on the exams. Also, they do have exam guides and sample exams, which are really good references. Got a couple of questions about chunks and pages and management thereof. If you drop me an email offline, I can get into a little more detail there. I think it's a little bit outside of the scope here. So are there any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you all very much for being on. If there are parts you missed, and I know there's a couple of parts where I went quickly through the slides, both the slides and the webcast will be up on the website. Probably usually takes a few days. So check back. Again, I'm Tom at Advanced Data Tools, so feel free to drop me any questions you have. I will be at the IBM Insight Conference in Vegas in October if anyone wants to come up, say hi. Always nice to see Informix folks there. And thank you all very much. Hopefully some of you will tune in, or if you're not a 4GL person, you'll point anyone in your organization who is. The Genero stuff really is a lot of the wave of the future, because so many of us, and a lot of us don't even know it, have 4GL running some of the core systems at our companies, and then being able to directly port them without having to, write whole new applications to get to modern infrastructure is a fantastic thing. So it should be a really good talk. I know I'm really looking forward to it. I'm hoping a lot of you are as well. So thank you all very much for being on, and looking forward to having you on our future webcasts.